Hey, Carl here to say that Music to Code By is now an app called Music to Flow By. Now you can listen to the tracks on your phone with offline capability. The first 3 tracks are free, and the entire catalog is available by subscription with a new track arriving every month. Just go to musictoflowby.com for all the links. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're here at Connect. Mitra Azizarad is here. We're going to talk to her in just a few minutes. But do you want to say anything about Connect? We haven't really said much about this event.
I think we've always been invited to this show, but it's often conflicted with other things. It was tough to actually get here. I'm excited that we're actually here now.
Right.
We've already seen the keynote, which is amazing. I mean, it was just ripping fast. So much to talk about. But the
differences between like Ignite and Connect and Build, I mean, those are 3
very different shows.
Very different shows.
We're going to have to ask Mitra about that because I think it's her show. She knows better than anybody what the differences are.
Okay, we'll do that. So let's roll the music then for a little bit. We call Better Know a Framework.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
I found this really cool blog post called Modern JavaScript Explained for Dinosaurs. And actually, I didn't find it. I can't take credit. AppVNexter Jay Stulo found this and posted it on our Slack channel. And it's what it's really good about doing is sort of answering these big why questions about why JavaScript is so complicated and why do we have to do all this stuff? It starts with 2 dinosaurs talking to each other in a cartoon, and it says, front-end devs used to just need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, apparently, they need to learn about Node, NPM, Grunt, Gulp, Webpack, Babel. Wait up! What the heck do I need Node for on the front end?
That's
right,
funny.
so these dinosaurs are talking. And so this really speaks to old school developers who just don't understand what the heck is going on in JavaScript and why there's so many tribes and why there's so many different tools and why these things don't just work together the way they should. And why do I have to learn all this new stuff? So
that's really cool.
I thought it was a really good thing. That's about all I want to say about it, though. I'm going to let you read it and just go there because, this is show 1498. You go to 1498.pwop.me. You will find it.
Awesome.
That's it.
Good
so
one, dude.
Who's talking to us today, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1479, the one we did with Mr. Skeet, John Skeet, when we were in London at ProgNet. And we ended up talking about diagnostics primarily.
Right.
But I would think about serious modern developer skills. That is a big one, right? Yeah. It's just the ability to really diagnose a problem. And Casey Collins has this comment where he said, the timing on this episode has been perfect. John's comment that we have to get better at diagnosis is spot on. I've been working on production issues with a newer application earlier this week, and I found myself in a familiar situation where I have to explain the issue, my analysis of the issue, and my hypothesis of how to fix said issue. Of course, others are working on the issue, throw in random, are you sure it's not the unrelated item over here? There's somebody in the back saying, if you just written in Ruby on Rails, you wouldn't have this problem.
I know,
and I have to step them through why this isn't a factor. So, I mean, it's interesting to see Casey's viewpoint here of he's done the diagnostics, then has to prove that he's done the diagnostics to even attempt a fix.
Right.
He goes on to say, I've worked with many individuals in our industry who lack the critical thinking ability and just want a solution to make the bleeding stop because the boss is breathing down their neck for it to get fixed. It's like, keep whacking it with a hammer. Maybe it'll get better. If we are
I like the Richard interpretation. That's really good.
You like that interpretation? Yeah, that's good. If we are given the chance to explore, experiment, and learn from these situations, then we can be confident about how fixing the issues permanently rather than just band-aiding them over. Of course, not everyone has the chance to develop those critical thinking skills. I attribute mine to years of help desk experience and having to walk users through troubleshooting over the phone. That's a good thought. Help desk folks learn to be very methodical when you're dealing with people that are maybe a little overwhelmed and angry. It's a good combination. Maybe employers should require everyone in IT and software to serve some time as help desk from time to time to keep those critical thinking skills sharp. I would also say in engineering skills. Some of the best developers I've ever met were electrical engineers by trade, and that those skills carry really well.
Well, it's about problem solving, like John said.
And thinking comprehensively.
The engineering mind.
So Casey, totally on board with your thoughts. Thanks so much for them. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media because we publish every show to Google Plus and Facebook. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Send us a tweet. We preserve them in formaldehyde.
Really?
For future archaeological exploration. All right. Now let's answer that whole question about Connect. But Mitra Azizarad is here. She is Corporate VP of Cloud Application Development, Data and AI Marketing, leading product marketing for developer and data platform offerings spanning Visual Studio, Xamarin, .NET, SQL Server, Azure Data Services, and for artificial intelligence related products and services such as Cognitive Services, Azure Bot Service, among many others. Mitra is also responsible for Microsoft's AI commercial and development strategy to democratize AI and make it accessible to every developer. Her team is responsible for the Connect event, as Richard mentioned in the comment.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Show. Yeah,
Thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
It's a great show. It's really fun, but it's a different style of show.
Yes. And it is a different style because it started out in a very different way. I actually came up with the idea for Connect about 4 or 5 years ago because we really wanted to make sure that we had a place to tell the story in a very open way, I would say. When we first did the first Connect, and the very first Connect actually wasn't even named Connect. But we did come to New York, and we were doing a Visual Studio launch, and we brought Azure into it, and we said we're going to really take a cross-company approach to this. But the idea at the time was to bring folks like Xamarin on stage, and quite frankly, at that time, I got a little bit of a hard time. Now we're talking about 4 or 5 years ago.
So before they were acquired,
but we were partnering with them, and we thought, wow, folks really do need to get the memo. And we created this mantra that we have, which is any developer, any application, any platform. Way back when. And when Satya became CEO, it was actually, he tweeted that, and it was actually his second most popular tweet after the one of becoming CEO. And he did that, I think, at our second Connect right after becoming CEO. Now it seems very natural. In fact, I saw tweets today. I was just
realizing you were doing that 5 years ago. That is kind of the mantra of Microsoft now.
Yeah, now it is. But, I would say we saw tweets today because our whole thing has always been the opening demo is the thing you don't expect, right? It's what are we doing on the Mac? What are we doing, with Linux? What are we doing? And we started last year, joining the Linux Foundation. We did open sourcing of .NET Core at Connect. We also brought Google on stage 2 years back around TypeScript and VS Code. And that was also, we had the gall to ask, and they accepted. I say, gosh, how much would it take for a competitor to come on stage and tout how much they actually love your tools? They must really love it. And so I really feel about for developers, I am developers' biggest fan. And so I think in order to do the right thing and have developers be your fans, you need to be their fan first. And so that's what Connect was about. It was really about meeting developers wherever they are today. And going on that journey with them. But even if you saw today in our second keynote, a lot around AI. And we have an AI school that we are rolling out today.
AI school.
Exactly. And so it is very much about bringing, this year was you saw a lot about data as well. You saw a lot about AI, and it's very much about always being approachable for developers. AI is not just the realm of data scientists. You don't have to have a PhD to be doing that. And we do want to make sure for the 9 million professional developers out there, 6 million of those developers are .NET. We want to make sure that they also have a big role to play in the industry as it's moving forward.
It is interesting to think about AI as a general purpose tool that developers should all incorporate.
Well, there's tooling, but there's all the other aspects of it too. There's, you saw that we talked about Visual Studio for AI today, but also even the Databricks announcement.
And that's an acquisition.
It's not an acquisition; it's a partnership.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
it's a first-party service. We don't do that very often.
No, that's very unusual.
It's a first-party service, but I would say, it takes the best of Azure, it takes the best of Databricks, and it's really targeting folks. Really making sure that those powerful scenarios scenarios that really make AI as easy as possible, that we are putting that in the hands of developers, data engineers, data scientists. And so that's very much a part of AI, because if you really are interested in doing AI, 80% of AI is data.
Yeah.
And so Databricks is focused on the data side
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
And so, and they're not being acquired. Like when I saw them on
It's not
stage
an
today,
acquisition.
I thought, is this going to be an acquisition? But no, I guess it's just a
No.
partnership.
It's but a first party partnership. So it's Azure Databricks.
Interesting.
And so this is not a partnership where you go up into the marketplace and see, a
Right.
third party. This is actually an integration
In
between
the Azure console, we're going to see
There it
Databricks.
is. It's an actual Azure service
That's
in
really
the console, and it's totally integrated with security, with Azure Active Directory services. It's the same SLAs, all of that.
What I've been noticing about Azure's cognitive services lately and the things that Azure is doing with AI is that you have these two sort of camps. You have the offerings that are just you and your data and your algorithms,
Yes.
and you go ahead and figure it out. And you've got all these really higher level services that use the Azure AI tools,
That's right.
and they have these great big cognitive services that just work, and you don't have
That's
to
right.
do any of that work.
Or they're customizable, because a lot of sort of packaged cognitive services are very often not customizable, but ours are. So you can either use them as is, or you can train them. And that was part of the demo today, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
how
Seth did a
easy is
great
it
demo.
to train? Yeah, Seth always does a great job. I loved the banter. Actually, what I really loved the most about today was, and I really couldn't stop laughing. I think I was annoying the people behind me, was when Scott said, and whatever Mac users wear, I think they wear berets.
Yes, wearing berets. Yeah.
And then the whole row behind me started laughing as well. But there really is this focus for us around making everything approachable by developers. But I think AI is one of those things that has been in the realm of, oh my goodness, it is creating the models, and it's all of this thing that's really much more thought of as something that stays within the data scientist realm,
rarefied,
right?
yeah.
Very
Your
rarefied air.
Your average developer feels intimidated, trying to figure out how to do that stuff.
Well, even business, I would say at Ignite in September, what we heard from business people when we would talk to them one-on-one, much less developers, was business people would say, I know I'm supposed to really get what people are talking about here, and I know I should really find out what the outcomes are that we can drive. But the word that kept coming up was afraid. I'm just afraid I don't really get it. And so it really is taking a step back and being much more outcome based in terms of what this gives you, which is why we showed it. Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues you have there, especially on the business side, every time I've worked on a data science or, machine learning type project, when it works and provides a competitive advantage to that company, they stop talking about it.
That's right.
It's now secret sauce,
Yep.
and they go quiet. So it's almost like we never celebrate the wins,
Right.
Because they're so valuable.
Right.
They're like, I don't want
It
anybody
becomes
else to know what
competitive
I've done.
advantage.
It becomes this huge
Yeah.
competitive advantage, and so it suddenly gets secretive. As long as it doesn't work, we're happy to talk about it.
But I can see sort of we were talking about the really high level abstract cognitive services, and then the low level do-it-yourself. Here's your data. Here's your algorithms. I can see a sort of a middle ground happening where you've got these cognitive services set up, and do you have any data you want to plug into this to train it better to get the outcomes that you want?
Right.
Just give us access to that data, and then the algorithm's already set up. Everything, I can see that being attractive to business.
I would say,
people.
and that's a very differentiating thing for Microsoft, quite frankly, which is a lot of folks in the industry from a data perspective will say your data must be in the cloud and you need to start there. We actually are the only ones that say it doesn't matter where your data is because that is exactly the thing. Most of the folks, and even from a business perspective, will say, I don't even know where all my data is.
Sure.
I mean, like, how am I? It's not even just industry data. And a ton of data sits, and this is where Microsoft Graph plays a big part in this too, and especially for developers, is think of all the data that you have locked into your documents, even your PowerPoints, and all the kind of data.
Your email.
Your email.
It's crazy.
But not in a creepy way.
Yeah. But I know people, I put the IT hat on once in a while as an Exchange guy. People sometimes use their Exchange client as a file server.
Yeah, they do.
They're keeping docs and stuff, and they're
taking notes
sorting them
in
into
there.
folders,
Yes.
and like it all exists in there where nobody else can get at it.
Right.
Like I think it's one of the strengths of Office 365 is that now that graph takes a hold, and you have this tool. Delve is the tool on the O365 side that actually helps mine that mail
That's
to
right.
say, hey, these are assets of the company that other people could value. And you could do more with it. So for better or worse, they're kind of getting them to the cloud, but not in a very direct way, but just to be able to understand that data better.
But you want to glean intelligence and insight from wherever the data is, even if it's on-prem and locked on-prem, which in a lot of verticals, it would be.
It's easy to
think of
get
finance
that way.
or public
Sure,
sector.
sure.
And so you saw what Scott talked about today too, even from the database migration service and managed instance and things like that. When you're ready to move to the cloud, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. But in order to get those insights, you don't have to move anything. And that is a very different story. And we do find people take a deep breath once they hear that, because they typically don't hear that.
When it sounds like hybrid is the new normal.
Hybrid is the new normal, and I don't think that people are moving as quickly as, there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
You
don't move for movement's sake.
Exactly. And we get that, and I think it's the same thing, even if I think from an AI perspective, I started with Microsoft a long time ago as an engineer in the field, and working in public sector and in high security sort of accounts. And I remember working so closely with research in those days. There was I won't give the name of sort of the agency, but there was a need for some translation technology. And look at all the stuff we do with Lewis now and voice recognition. And I'm talking now probably 1993, 1994. We always had a very strong connection into research, and we were able, it wasn't productized, there wasn't, but just to say, we've been working on AI for such a long time. And we were able to provide translation technologies and things like that really helped, solve problems for organizations and companies in those days. And I used to always think at that time, is like, why don't we productize?
When is this going to be a product?
And lo and behold, 20 some years later. But it shows you, honestly, because even if you think about machine learning and stuff, 40, 50 years, a lot of the difference now is the inflection point of compute, of the storage, of the hardware, all of those things coming together with the ability to really abstract it at a much simpler level from a software perspective is now going to make this a very different proposition.
And I do think government's a lot less cost sensitive. Like those were national security thinking. And so they've got a much bigger budget for that stuff. I also think about, OLAP came from intelligence services. But it was really expensive the way they did it. But as that technology matured and it sort of came into the public view, it changed the way we analyze data. It was amazing. And this to me feels a lot like another wave of that.
Yeah, it does to me too.
That technology. I'm not a fan of the AI name just because it's been around so long. I think it has negative connotations.
Also, Hollywood got their hooks into that term. And,
I hear that.
As soon as you've got movies with the name on it, it's like, oh man, you're sort of casting that. But it is a big umbrella.
There's
a lot of stuff being put, especially in the Microsoft space, underneath that AI label. I mean, I'm not unhappy that we have it in a can. That it is the deep learning parts, and it is machine learning and business intelligence, and also the cognitive services. Like I kind of get that it's all there. I'm just not. I'm going to have to get used to using the term AI.
Our definition is that it is the way that we look at amplifying human ingenuity through intelligent technology. And that really is AI for us. And so, it is important too that it is, we get lots of questions around the data and bias in data and things like that. There's all these things that exist in society that are going to exist in your data as well. You can't, and quite frankly, you shouldn't try and eradicate it, because then you won't be able to recognize it within the data. And so and who's going to be the purveyor of whether that
the
bias,
arbiter of neutrality.
Exactly. Because maybe you're biased against murder. I don't know. That's a good bias. Maybe I don't know. There's things that there's things there that we, from a research perspective, work very hard on. And I think part of the focus we had with having Professor Hawking do a video for us
really
again.
Interesting intro.
Yes.
I was surprised.
That's the second time so he mentioned 2 years ago because we we worked with them and using .NET to create his communication system. And so he sent his technical assistant here and she did some whiteboarding and stuff like that on Channel 9 with us. But because he's been also so vocal
About AI
in particular, we thought for developers and you know, there were so many tweets about we are writers, we are dreamers.
Right.
Everybody really, and a number of developers wrote, you know, this isn't just about algorithms. This is, you know, our soul. This is something, this is like our children. It was like, for the MariaDB, right? When you create a product over 30 years, it becomes like your children kind of thing. I think all of that resonated a lot with the developers. At least the tweets showed that in spades, because there is an accountability and an ethical accountability for the people that are shaping the future and how we interact with the world, which is very much applications are a huge part of that.
And physicists rammed into this first, right?
Yes.
I mean, that is the Manhattan Project was the ultimate manifestation of physics understanding their ethical issues. And I think software's there now. And this technology is part of it.
Right.
Mitra, hold that thought for just 1 second while we take a moment to pay our bills. The word from our sponsors.
Hey, Rockheads, this is Carl. Have you tried Jetbrains Rider? It's a new cross-platform .NET IDE that's light yet powerful and comes from the makers of ReSharper, IntelliJ, IDEA, and WebStorm. You can write .NET code on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Rider has you covered. Rider helps you develop ASP.NET, .NET Core, .NET Framework, Xamarin, and Unity applications. Most languages used in .NET development are supported, from C#, VB.NET, F#, and XAML, to ASP.NET Razor syntax, JavaScript, TypeScript, and all that other front-end stuff. It comes with navigation, thousands of code inspections, refactorings, unit testing, debugging, rich coding assistance, and more advanced IDE features, powered by proven technology from ReSharper and WebStorm. Download Rider now and take it for a 30-day trial at rider.dotnetrocks.com. That's rider.dotnetrocks.com.
All right, and we're back. It's .NET Rocks. Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell here. We're talking to Mitra Azizirad. We're talking AI right now, but Mitra, I want to talk to you a little bit because you've been in Microsoft for a long time, and you spent the last 10 years in Visual Studio, and so you've seen .NET evolve from a Windows Microsoft-centric
have been a part of that. Yes, part of that evolution.
Yeah, you've driven it. Yeah. So tell us what's your take on the .NET ecosystem today and where we've gotten to? I mean, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but
I would say that .NET is an example that the rest of the company is actually learning from. They actually stand up .NET as an example of, as we look at the ecosystem and what it is, when you go to take something proprietary open, there's lots of conversations. We had lots of conversations about what it would mean to do .NET Core. We had lots of conversations about what it would mean to do Visual Studio Community, or to do things like Dev Essentials, or even the acquisition of Xamarin and what that would mean from a cross-platform perspective, and what was the message that we were really delivering.
There were people very afraid if Xamarin got acquired, it would break it.
Right.
That you take away that revenue motive because you just rolled it into the box. And
that was my decision, quite frankly. That was, as the business owner, that was my decision.
Because I did see that Xamarin adoption was somewhat held back because it was expensive.
It was expensive.
I worked with CTO types who are they look at their budget for their dev, and typically they're spending $1,500 a year on an MSDN subscription, a premium subscription, and maybe another $1,500 on a Telerik suite or a DevX suite, something like that. And then Xamarin. And iOS was $1,500 or $2,000, and Android was $2,000.
That's right.
I'm going to spend as much as I spend on a dev for a year again to give me two more platforms.
That's right.
And it was a challenge to approach that.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's like bringing in knowing it was just going to be part of the box. Okay, well, you took that cost barrier away. The challenge, of course, is it going to keep getting better? I think it has.
Oh, it definitely has. Yeah.
People thought that, and people thought, wow, if you roll that in for free, really
Right.
what I was looking at was how to continue to extend the value proposition to our developers through Visual Studio. And
Right.
quite frankly, that even means at the free level, right? And so
Yeah,
Visual Studio Community is
Has
exactly the
Xamarin.
same version of Visual Studio Professional, except that it's, we have a EULA around it, which
Right.
is 250 PCs and not more than $1 million. But it is, and even when we did that was a very controversial thing. And those were all decisions that, even as I looked at our SKU makeup, that I felt were very important decisions to make.
Do you get pressure internally saying you're taking a big chunk of revenue off the table when you do that?
Certainly people will ask those questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because Visual Studio is a very successful business from a revenue perspective. And there's maybe 16 businesses across Microsoft that are over a certain mark.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot more than 16 businesses. So that tells you that's pretty hefty. And Visual Studio is one of them.
Right.
And so when you come in, and this was not a decision taken lightly. And it was not a decision taken lightly because Visual Studio Professional is also extensible. And so is Visual Studio Community. One of the things even engineering asked me was, are you sure you actually want to keep the extensibility at the free level?
Remember the old Community Edition, the Jamie Carnesale incident? Right? Where the free product didn't have the extensibility stuff. And here was this young man, I think he was 18 or 19, who found a way to slip his own unit testing into it and circumvented the EULA. And you get in this situation where Microsoft, needs you to kind of follow the rules. Otherwise, the whole contract goes out the window. And he decided to, be the tough guy.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to some internal studio guys when this was going on. We never did a show about it. We think we talked about it a couple of times.
Right.
But it's like, he's making a mistake. Like you don't back a large corporation into a corner. They will lawyer up. Like that's how this works. But it's interesting and I remember when the Essentials came out and he's like, nope, the Extensibility Model staying in. And I'm like, well, there will never be another Carnesale event ever again.
I didn't even think of that. It was
That's so long ago.
Yeah,
now.
I did. And that was probably before my Visual Studio time.
Sure.
But I think, the thing is that when you balance between, at the end of the day, for me, usage by developers, whether it's free or it's paid, is the most important thing. And in fact, I call it that. I don't call it, I call it free or paid usage. I actually don't say it's this SKU or it's that SKU because usage is the commonality there. And I'd much rather people using it regardless of the SKU that they're using. Right. And so the issue though is to say, if you make it more and more friction free for developers to access the technology, it's going to pay off somewhere else in the ladder of platform and products. We're a platform company first and foremost.
Sure.
We do put developers at the heart of everything we do. And so that means that, as folks were talking today, developers are craftsmen. And so the tools are very important to them.
Right.
I really feel a strong accountability around always making sure that we are doing the right job by developers and around the tools, and that we are removing friction at every point that we possibly can. And so when I first came in, we actually had 21 different SKUs that were sort of in the Visual Studio family.
It
And
did get a little out of hand.
it was out of hand. So one of the first things, we focused on, and I also wanted to extend, I thought with Visual Studio Code and all of that was Visual Studio really becomes a family of products.
Right.
Visual Studio is really, whether you use it or not, we've done lots of studies on Visual Studio with developers, whether you use it or not, it is perceived as a gold standard in the industry for a tool very well done.
Yeah.
And so that gives an uplift to anything, at that point. And how do you best, continue that sort of feeling? It's a feeling more than it's a purchase,
And definitely, when we're talking to .NET developers, there's these two different work styles. There's the give me the all-inclusive, we'll take care of you, everything's in here.
Yeah.
If you want to customize, you can, but, you're living in the happy realm that is the Studio IDE versus the more VS Code, roll your own, this editor and that debugger and this compiling tool and this package manager, you get to pick and choose. So it's interesting that the culture has gone divergent. Like there's two really different approaches to this.
Mm-hmm. There is. And a couple of things. One is, I think from a .NET developer perspective, especially when we went forward with .NET Core and made it open, we had a lot of .NET developers actually evangelizing non-Microsoft developers to try it.
Right.
And so really a third of the downloads of .NET Core are non-Microsoft developers.
Yeah.
60% of the contributions to .NET come from outside of Microsoft.
Which is cool.
And so that's really what we wanted to go for, was this healthy ecosystem that also attracts folks to come into it that may never have really, maybe there was too much friction, or maybe it would be too hard for me to even try that and get access to that. That's part of our job, is to remove that.
It sort of required a big leap of faith, on a lot of parties to do that. And we've been talking about just going open, .NET Core, because of the things that you've been talking about, because of the way that it's perceived, and will the money come, and how are we going to support it, and all of that stuff.
That's right.
But sometimes that's what you have to do, and it worked out.
It did work out. I would say I am known for taking risks. That is, I've been around a long time, and so there's that reputation. But they're calculated risks.
Yeah.
In your heart of hearts, you sort of know after a period of time what the right things are. And I do think
you did it right.
And because it is true that authentically, I am the biggest fan of the developer community. And so I think people if you see the changes and you see that they're authentically received well, it's because the reasons behind it are authentic.
Awesome. Yeah.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yep. It's time to announce an extensibility model for the mid-show joke.
Oh.
You basically get to tell your own punchline. All right, so here's the setup. Two guys walk into a bar.
You'd think the second one would have seen it coming.
See? It works. This is how we do things. It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club and become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today, and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM, and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. And you can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. And learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Satish Apasani.
Oh, congratulations, Satish.
Yes.
Golf clap for you, sir.
And Satish just won the D-Experience subscription from DevExpress, a big pile of awesome from our friends over there, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the .NET Rocks fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member, chosen at random, from the .NET Rocks fan club.
It's coming up.
Oh, yeah. Not this show.
Not this show.
But soon.
It'll be in December, but
soon.
we're right at the end of November here.
And you got to sign up to win, so go do that now.
Yeah.
We also like to ask our guests, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, Mitra, what would you buy? It doesn't have to be developer technology. It could be anything.
Oh, are you a gadget person?
I am more of a gadget person.
Yeah.
I definitely, well, I'll tell you what I did just buy, because we moved. I have the whole Nest and, Ring technology for the front door and throughout the whole house. And I was recently overseas and somebody was ringing the doorbell. And, I love, it was you. Yeah. So, and I spent probably more than $5,000, but I did like that.
You wired it all up.
I wired all up.
So you were able to see who was at the front door via phone.
Yeah. And talk to them.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so, so I'm an early adopter.
Kind of funny when they ding dong on your phone, you say hello, and they say, yeah, I got a package. Can you open the door? You can say, I'm in South America right now, actually.
Well, there was just that Amazon
They don't
thing.
believe that you're not home, though.
Yeah, it just works. There was that Amazon thing recently where what if you actually use a lock? You
could go in.
and you actually let them
I would
unlock the door.
never-
Right.
That was generally the reaction of everybody. It's like, sorry,
kidding me?
not really going to let
who would do that,
the person
honestly?
in
Who would
there.
do that?
That's actually a good question to ask your listeners. Would you do that?
I don't think anybody would.
I know.
But it's also, on one hand, I'm like, what are they doing? And on the other hand, it's like, it turns out not everything Amazon does is perfect either.
So why doesn't Amazon sell a box with a remotely openable lid that's locked, and you put it right outside your door, and then they could put the
Like a
stupid stuff
dog
in
latch
there.
or dog, where just a
Right.
little piece opens up
Just a
and they
place to
can
secure it.
And if they made it refrigerated, all the better.
Yeah. So they can drop your beer in there.
The fridge mailbox.
A fridge mailbox, it's just outside the house. Yeah. I don't know if I want them inside the house. It's fair. Little digression.
Yes.
Because I read your whole LinkedIn background too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. You were chief of staff to Mr. Balmer for a year.
Yes.
Is that correct?
For close to 2 years.
2 years. Wow. That's got to be amazing.
Well, it was, I was in the field for the first 12 years of my career at Microsoft. And there were a number of opportunities to come to corporate. I always turned them down because I thought I was more of a field person.
Sure. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic that you can only go so far in the field, and then just the gravity of Redmond pulls on you.
Well, and Steve had actually offered me a job several times. I actually had turned them down.
Wow.
This was one where I really had said, okay, I'll only come for a year. And then the discussion was, well, at least come for 2 years, because I always thought I would go back to the field.
Right.
And now here it's been 14 years that I never left because the opportunities to do things at such an international scale.
Sure.
And the impact, the things, I'm not one of those people that ever asks folks what their 3 to 5 year plans are, because I've never, and the thing is that sometimes when opportunity knocks, you don't even know what's behind that decision.
It wouldn't be opportunity if you knew what it was going to happen.
Right, because my whole thing was to go back,
Sure.
and so we didn't. I think, the thing about that was such a learning experience because Steve would just ask interesting questions that I had no knowledge about, which would be like, hey, should we do a branded version of paper, or like an office branded version of paper? And I was like, I don't know, I'll find out. There would be things like that, or get on a plane, go to Japan, find out about our IPT in those days where there was IPTV. I find out our IPTV strategy. So there was a learning, that was all within the first week. There was a learning opportunity there that you jump into the deep end of the. I
met him a couple of times, mini golfed with him for a couple of holes once.
It
was an RD thing. The man had every number about Microsoft in his head.
Absolutely.
He knew every sales group. He knew every product. He knew where it was performing in different locales. Like he was completely immersed in the company.
Absolutely.
And he was intense.
Very.
And he's funnier than I think anybody knows that hasn't actually talked to him. He's hilarious.
Yeah, he has a great sense of humor. So it definitely was an intense experience.
Sure. And that was relatively early days for him because he came on, it was a 2000.
He had just become, because that was 2003. And so I think it'd been not quite 3 years that he had become
So
CEO.
still those are the early days. And
It was.
Any funny stories that haven't been told yet?
Any you can tell.
Probably not. I might stay away from that.
Yeah, no question. Well, I'm in the midst of working on the history of .NET. And so, him coming in, it's a thing. I'm going to write a book.
Awesome.
So, and one of the things, I've come to appreciate him more as I've done the research to realize, like, you're in those years around the consent decree,
right?
And sort of the reshaping of how Microsoft's going to function for the next few years.
Right.
So it must have been very powerful times. Like that's hard work, and the first few years of the second person to ever lead the company,
right?
It's just not a small thing to do.
No. And I was running our U.S. public sector and U.S. federal business in those. That was the last role I had in the field before coming to corporate. So, yes, DOJ and all of that at that time was very much, because that was also our customer.
Right. Yeah. So here's this customer
You're calling on your customer, who standardized on Exchange, by the way,
right.
in the middle of all of that. So, we still ran a business, with them.
And at the same time, they're saying, we don't like the way you guys are doing things.
That's right.
So, very challenging balance. And it's interesting that you stayed in Redmond and kept going.
Yeah.
And I mean, for better or worse, the gender ratio in the vice president level, like you're
Yes.
one of relatively few. A dozen?
Probably 20.
20 total out of 150?
In a group of 150, I would say, yeah. Out of 110,000 people.
It's a pretty rarefied
It took me a
atmosphere.
long time.
Yeah.
I think it took me 23 years, but I took a very different path than most.
Sure.
And also when I came in as an engineer, and even then I actually turned down the first 2 or 3 jobs Microsoft offered me at the time. And I was always purely technical. And even my first 7 years at Microsoft were purely technical. And I actually was one of the only people, probably still, who moved into running a sales and marketing organization from really pure engineering. But you know, when I came in, there were 300 engineers in the field and only 9 were women.
Wow.
So I came into a very different time. As well. And I came in with a very different sort of background because I came from international organizations like the World Bank and Intelsat. And so standards in those days, like X400, X500, you know, that's where I was coming from. And I had at that time in fact, I worked at NASD, which was the regulatory commission for NASDAQ. And we did a lot of the software standards. And I remember Microsoft coming in and talking to me and showing me messaging with a DOS client. And I was like, no, not interested. You know, it was like, and then when I was working at Intelsat, so International Telecommunications and Satellite Corporation, that's when I started talking to Microsoft about LAN Manager, which was in beta then.
Right, yeah.
And I actually, again, remember I take risks in that I had thought that, wow, because they were using IBM LAN server at the time internally.
Right.
And it was OS2, you know, it was OS2 based in those days. And, you know, the first version of LAN Man, there was that partnership between IBM and Microsoft, and we had this code named Tiger, which was the OS2.
Isn't that when Jim Elchin comes on board and he was the Banyan Vines guy?
That's
and
right.
They were trying to get all the protocols to interplay with each other. Like, it was a
that was
really
like
hard problem.
1991, something like that. Yeah. So I started really looking at LAN Manager for Intelsat, and I actually went forward with the beta version. I'll never forget it, for like 1,000 seats. And I kept giving Microsoft all this feedback because even then you had to pick your protocol separately. So TCP/IP there were all these vendors, and you'd have to decide nothing, you know. And we would be cutting coax, like we were really doing all of that. And I would go back
with the little drill and the clamps.
And then you'd always have to do it a second time because you didn't get it. Right. And so I was giving a lot of feedback to Microsoft at the time, and they were like, why don't you come, work for us? And I was like, no, I'm not going to work for a software company. That's
You're
how
just a vendor.
Exactly. Well, that is how I, to be honest, that is how I looked at it at the time. But then, so they had talked to me about a messaging specialist role as well. And I turned that down. When the networking systems engineer job came around, that's when I thought, I might go there for, again, my whole famous thing is 2 years and then I never leave, right? So now 23 years later, I'm still here. But
Campbell said the same thing to me. He's like, I'm only on for 50 shows and I'm out of here. Yeah.
How many shows? 1,498?
Something like that, but I became co-host at show 100. So there've been 2 previous co-hosts that each did 50. So I figured I'll do 50. Missed it by that much. Just a little bit.
What was magic about 50 though?
It just worked out that way.
I guess so. Yeah. We didn't plan it.
No, it's roughly a year, right? When you're doing a show a week.
Yeah.
And then.
But this is great hearing you guys talk about this history because you've been head down in it and you've lived it and made it. And I'm just I wish I had some popcorn right now. This is awesome.
Well, it turns out we're 2 old networking geeks.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I did as much networking as I needed to get my bulletin boards running and all that stuff.
I bought a car. My first apartment was paid for off the back of like Novell NetWare.
Novell, yeah, right.
I remember the bindery.
I was certified.
2.11. It was good stuff.
I just remember the bindery was the magic goo where everything was coordinated. And
network cards were expensive and they were special.
Yeah.
And Novell even made their own server for a while based on the Motorola 68000. It was a heck of a good file server. That thing made me a ton of money, man. BitNose set up and running right. That was good business.
It was the gold standard for quite a while. In fact, that was when LANman came out. That was the top competitor.
It was the competitor.
Yeah.
And then it advanced. Well, Microsoft turned networking into a built-in product,
right? Because NT was the next iteration of LANman, which then just was built. And then it wasn't this separate kind of thing. You looked at networking separate than non-network. Like you don't
Right.
even think
You
like
don't
that
even think like
anymore.
that. Yeah,
Right.
Windows for Workgroups, 1992, right?
That's actually what the other thing was which became Windows 95. But I looked at that as well at Intelsat, and they weren't sharing printers. And I was like, well, could you at least share printers if you were doing like? And so it was. And what's the difference between this and LAN WAN? Because I could see that the strategy either
Yeah, they
needed to
were gonna run into each
converge
other.
or like right.
Yeah.
So that was codenamed Snowball.
Oh, wow.
And then became Chicago.
Yes.
We knew
And then
that.
became, yes.
Yeah.
And that, so, see, I have all the code names of everything. In fact, sometimes we do in fact, there is this thing that Satya does where he brings the CVPs together in Suncadia.
Oh, yeah.
Up in Washington. And one of the things they do is little trivia things. And one of them was to list all these different code names and see who could remember
yeah.
the most code names.
You're in there. Oh, my goodness. You
You have to be there
scary
a
at
while
Microsoft
to have
Trivia.
known, yeah.
Right.
But, especially if you were on the engineering side or you're on
Sure.
the technical side, you're going to remember those code
Yeah,
names.
those code
They,
names
they
are
all
burned
said
into it.
all roads lead to Chicago, which was Chicago
That was when-
mythical
95.
object-oriented operating system where it was.
No.
No, that was Windows 95.
Yeah.
Chicago
was
became
95.
Windows 95.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
You don't get to Whistler Blackcomb when you start talking
I
Windows.
think
no,
you're
this
talking
was
about
Windows XP.
Hailstorm.
No,
Yeah.
it was before. It was before Hailstorm. It
That's
was when they
2000.
started thinking that in the future we'll have an operating system that's all object-oriented from the bottom
In
up.
my
I
memory,
can't
that was
remember what
Blackcomb.
It was before that. I remember
It never came to pass.
No.
It was a prototype.
they were talking about it a long time.
Yeah. That was
Anyway.
way back there. All right.
Anyway,
We're all dancing
I'll
in
think
ancient
about-
code
yeah.
names.
Yeah, I'm just
You'll
filing back.
send us an email later because it was this.
It was this. Yeah.
but before it came out, we had an idea that it was going to be this all-encompassing thing, and then it turned out to go really slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had other issues.
Yeah.
WinFS, all the stuff that then became
that
became
WinFS and
Longhorn.
things like that.
Longhorn,
Yeah.
right.
But even before that.
Even before that, they were talking about it.
This is a blast.
I remember
from
Tom
the past.
Button talking about it.
It's what happens when folks that have been doing this for a while all get into trouble. Where do you want to go from here? Should we talk a little bit about Next Connects? Like, this is a great show. It's obviously morphed in the past few years.
Yep.
Yes, it
Why
has
New
become-
York?
The first year that we came here, honestly, again, before it was Connect, we came and we did it in the meatpacking district. And I'll tell you why we chose New York was because I wanted it to be an internet. I always knew that I wanted it to be online, and we weren't really doing the live streaming online events, especially at that time.
Sure.
And I wanted the time zone to be good for Europe
Right.
and for LATAM.
Yeah.
And I
So East
wanted
Coast
to
is
make sure
better.
that we hit certain verticals like finance and public sector and things like that. And so it ended up that we, out of almost any event, got the most sort of international participation and coverage. And so New York just worked out that way.
Yeah.
And then Spring Studios, it hadn't even been finished yet.
That's
now
where
they
we
do.
are, by the
You're
way.
right.
Right.
We're at Spring Studios. Thank you. Before they were finished, we were the first contract they ever had for an event because we came in and saw it and liked it. And now, of course, they do Fashion Week here and they do all these
Yeah, all
things
kinds
here.
of
It's
cool
become
things.
a really,
Yeah.
but we got in while the getting was good, I guess.
Yeah, right at the beginning of all of that.
We also wanted it to look quite different. So I really chose it too because I didn't want it to look like the typical Microsoft event.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
Which
enough.
Scott commented on the first year we were here at Spring Studios. He was like, wow.
Totally
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, totally different.
Totally
Yeah,
different.
Totally different style. So we're going to see new things. Get some ideas for next year.
Definitely. We will be continuing to build on and you'll see it at build too, right?
Yeah.
So as we sort of go marching forward, you'll see a lot more from the data and AI perspective for
That
sure.
Seems to have a lot of energy there.
Yeah.
A lot of energy. And this was really we did a partial coming out party at Build in May. If you saw Harry Shum's keynote, which, he said developers are
That's
at the
really
heart
when
of
they
everything we
announced
do.
the team. When
It was.
Harry's at the top and putting together this whole group, and an
That's right.
extraordinary group of smart people moved over into that group.
Crazy
Yeah.
smart. I don't even know how many
Yeah.
PhDs that
Yeah.
are, it's interesting for us, for my team, for myself, is that, we're working with research as if it were a product group.
Interesting.
Right. And so there's not this, when you work with a typical BG, what we call them the business groups, where they're like Scott, runs cloud and enterprise. That's the BG.
Yep.
Whenever you start, you're looking at sort of what is the business side of all of this? In research, it doesn't start that way.
No, they don't work that way at all.
No. So when you actually really want to grow, you're thinking, hey, what is the business impact of this? This is a very interesting, it's a great learning for me because it's a very interesting approach. You approach research very differently than you approach the rest of the company.
I mean, we've been under NDA in various forms, being RDs and things. I've been able to go to the MSR Open Days, which generally is only internal.
That's right.
But for a few lucky folks, we've been able to go to that. Yeah. We lucked out. We met Don Syme before F#, right? Actually, I read one of his papers, and then I found him at one of the Open Days. I'm like, dude, I really want you to, because he was the guy who really saw, hey, Visual Studio is a platform for experimenting with language, and that's what he was doing. The stuff he was doing eventually became F#, but we just got lucky. We talked to him before any of that happened. Yep. But it came from those Open Days.
That's right.
The extraordinary things that the MSR folks are working on.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a great show. We can't wait to be back next year. And
thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's great to have you and talking to all our listeners. And
anytime.
Yeah,
great stuff.
Our pleasure. And it's really a lot of fun and interesting to see where this goes. Because clearly, you've got such a span on the dev side, studio and Examiner and so forth, and having AI included in that,
and data.
Yeah, your responsibility set's just going to keep getting larger.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Mitra.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy. Life is hard.